morning, YouTubers. I apologize for my background. I'm taking a Sunday stroll, even though it ain't Sunday. So forgive me for the background noise. But as you can see by the title, there's a lot of Switch hate going on. And before I get into that, I have a few news items I would like to talk about before I get into the meat and potatoes of this video. Now, for those of you that's worried about if your Nintendo Switch accessories like controllers and such is compatible with the Switch 2, fear not. All of your Nintendo Switch first party accessories like the NES controller, the N64 controller, the Sega gamepad, the Joy-Cons, the Pro controllers are playable on the Nintendo Switch 2 moving forward. So that'll save you a bit of cash, because we all know the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be very expensive and people may not have enough money to buy extra accessories and games, even though you should be saving for those extra accessories. Now that's out of the way, let's get into the next news bit. Expensive game cards. We all know the Nintendo Switch game cards are expensive, and here's the thing, guys. Every generation, just about, the game prices go up by $10 increments. We have seen in the past, video games were $50. Then with the 360 era, it went up to $60. And now, fast forward to the PS5 and Series X era, it's $70. With the rising of video game costs and development, this is expected. And not to mention inflation and the tariffs that's going on, all plays a part in why the Switch 2 is expensive, but it's worth every bit of its weight and coin. With what the Nintendo Switch could do performance-wise, this is easily a $700 to $800 system Nintendo's giving you at a steal at $450, and the extra $50 will get you the Mario Kart bundle at $500. Nintendo games are all quality. You're getting full-fledged games on cartridges, on the newer, more faster proprietary red cartridges that holds a significant amount of data, with the base gigabytes being 64 gigs at the moment. You're getting everything, the game is entirety, no DLC, everything is included on the cartridge. That's better than you spending $120 to $250 for a deluxe edition game on an Xbox or a collector's edition. And we all know people overspend actually for these deluxe editions. So I don't see what's the big issue of Nintendo Switch 2 games costing $80 when people spend $1,300 on iPhones, $2,000 on a GPU for their computer, $3,000, $2,000 for their computer. And so why the hate? So, and guys, remember, we've seen this happen with the N64 era and the 3DS era, where the 3DS was priced at $250. Nintendo dropped it down to $165. N64 games were $80, $90 a pop, but significantly dropped in prices down to $30. I remember buying Turok Oblivion for $30, Extreme G for $30, and 64 games significantly became cheaper. And with the Switch 2, it'll be no different. Yes, the games may be priced high at launch at $80, but over time, guys, give it 6 months to a year, the Switch 2 games will drop down in price $50 to $60, just like the Nintendo Switch games currently are. So fear not, guys. Just let Nintendo get their money within the first year, and they will drop those prices. I do agree the prices are high, but they will come down in price, and the price has been justified with Nintendo Switch 2 games. Like I said, they're coming complete on the new fast data cartridges, 64 gigabyte cartridges. So guys, don't complain. And as a collector, I'm glad Nintendo They're still putting games on cartridges, and I do not mind paying $80 for a game I know that can be reserved and placed on my shelf that will continue to hold its value, and I can resell that game for a good bit of money. So the investment is pretty much worth it. I'm not a big fan of those game key cards, but I'll do my best to avoid them. Vote with your wallets. And that's about it, guys, as far as the expensive cost of the Switch 2 games. It's pretty much justified. And speaking of pricing, the Switch 2, with all the negative press that Sony has been paying these YouTubers and journalists to say bad things about the Switch 2 to get it to not sell, well, in current news, the Switch 2 actually, pre-orders are sold out in Europe. Pre-orders for Nintendo Switch sold out in minutes. So obviously, people do not care about the high price. The price has been justified for them. They feel as if the Switch 2 is worth it. The power is there. The first party titles are there. And the first party titles that aren't there yet will be coming down the pipeline. So Nintendo fans already know what they're buying themselves into. So Nintendo is still off to a great start. Whatever issues there is as far as pricing and confusion will be ironed out. And as far as I'm hearing, in the US is only where the confusion is. Everywhere else across the country, it's clear cut what these Switch prices are for the games. And there are $60 games, there are $70 games, and there are $80 games. So don't let the $80 price tag fool you. They do have affordable games out there that are $60 and $70, so we don't have to worry about that. So all the Switch hate, I don't know why they have all the Switch hate, guys, but of course I know there are a lot of people out there that have their favorite piece of plastic and they do not want to see Nintendo succeed. That's all it is. And I'm pretty sure Sony and the competitors are paying for all this bad press, but it's not working. People are still pre-ordering the Nintendo Switch 2. People are anticipating this system, and I've seen articles of someone saying, hey, Cyberpunk is finally on the Switch, Elden Ring is finally on the Switch, after being criticized that those high profile AAA games weren't on the Switch. Like the Nintendo Switch needed those games to sell anyway. They didn't. The Switch clearly sold 150 million without those high-end AAA games, proving that Nintendo is great, the brand is strong, and they're not like Sony and Microsoft, who needs a certain amount of games to sell. And Microsoft and Sony has spoiled everyone that, hey, high-end graphics is where it's at, less gameplay, you just watch it like an interactive movie. And now they're feeling the heat from that decision, and even Sony is trying to backpedal and come out with their own handheld system similar to the Nintendo Switch, and now they're trying to say that graphics really doesn't matter now. It's so funny to me. And to add insult to injury, I saw an article last night, and Sony were actually asking PlayStation fans what do they think of the Nintendo Switch 2. That is so funny, guys. You know what that means to me? That means that they're getting ready to copy the Nintendo Switch once again. And Sony have been copying Nintendo for years, ever since the N64 days. And that's a no-brainer. After the flop of the PS Portal, the PSP and the PS Vita failed to compete against Nintendo's handhelds. So, Sony trying to copy Nintendo with a handheld is not going to work. We've seen that happen with the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck tried to copy Nintendo as well as other PC manufacturers that came out with their own PC handhelds, failed to go up against the Nintendo Switch. Nintendo Switch is the reigning champ. It is the best console, the best idea of a console to come out in the past 8 years, which has everybody in the industry trying to copy Nintendo's success. And it's kind of funny to me, all the flack that Nintendo has been getting, everybody wants to copy Nintendo. You see the reverse psychology in all of this? So, you know, back to this whole cyberpunk and evil. Sorry guys, got tripped up a little bit here. So back to the cyberpunk and the Elden Ring situation. When people were criticizing the Switch for not having these titles, now that the Switch 2 has it, now people are moving the goalposts, saying, oh man, those games are old. We played those games 4 or 5 years ago. But you see what I'm saying? People love to move the goalposts. But you have to understand, there are Nintendo fans out there that never played Elden Ring or Cyberpunk. A lot of these AAA games that we missed out on the Nintendo Switch due to power differences could finally play and enjoy those games. And we've seen the current Switch get old titles and still sell more than PlayStation and Xbox 4 or 5 years ago, which further proves that people want to play all those AAA games. They'd rather play those AAA games on a Nintendo platform. Enough said. So Nintendo will continue to see success with the Switch 2. I definitely think it'll surpass the Switch 1 sales, even though it doesn't need to. Anything over 100 million is pretty much due process. It's great. And Nintendo doesn't have anything to prove, but with a more powerful console and ability to get all AAA games, they can't lose. And yes, it may not run as great or look as great slightly than some of those PS5 titles, and it doesn't need to. It's a handheld. There's only so much that we can expect from a handheld. You can't expect a Game Boy to output the same graphics as an NES or Super Nintendo. And as far as Valve and all these other PC handhelds, when it falls advertisement, even they're feeling the heat. You have to understand, whenever you decide to make a console or a handheld, you have to play by the console and handheld rules, which are graphic limitations, CPU limitations, and frame rate limitations, even space limitations as far as memory goes. You know, and that's just how it works. And Nintendo understands this, and for what Nintendo has done to the industry as a whole with the Switch is remarkable, and Switch 2 will continue to carry that torch. I do not see the Switch 2 failing whatsoever, even with its high price. The price is justified. Whenever Sony and Microsoft have high price consoles, they launch at $500, nobody complained. When scalpers were selling the system for $1,000, people were still buying it. They came out with the miserable, pointless PS5 Pro, people still bought it. So why are people wondering about Nintendo's prices? Because if you look at it, Nintendo's still coming out cheaper than those consoles, because Nintendo Switch 2 is pushing out PS5 visuals and at times look better. Remember guys, we've seen the Street Fighter 6 comparisons between the Switch 2, Series S, basically all current consoles. And the Switch 2 was really holding its own. It significantly looked better than the PS4 version, and it was up there with the PS5 version. Even in some shots and gameplay, it looked better on the Switch 2. Now remember, Switch 2 has better ray tracing cores than the PS5. All those games they showed at the Nintendo Treehouse and at the Nintendo store where you can go and play, you can demo the Nintendo Switch 2 games, those were early builds. Cyberpunk was on a 7-week build, so developers haven't even maxed out the system yet. So imagine when they max out the system, start using the Switch 2 to its full potential, the parity between the two systems, the PS5 and Switch 2, that gap is going to be close to almost non-existent, to where you can't even compare them. It's going to get worse from here. I'm just glad to see Nintendo, they took it there. Actually, they went above and beyond. Every problem that we had with the Nintendo Switch, has been fixed. Nintendo president, they listened. So nobody can complain about the bad frame rates, the blurry graphics, and the lack of AAA games, because Nintendo went far beyond what we asked for. They gave us a 120 hertz screen, HDR, and VRR. The competition, these PC handhelds can't play 4K docked. A lot of them don't have HDR. And even the Steam Deck, not all games are HDR, only a select handful. Very few titles you can count on two hands, probably even one. But with the Switch 2, the power of the Switch 2, and using the best GPU maker, which is NVIDIA, we can get HDR in every single game. And we can get 120 FPS in most games if we drop it down to 720p, 1080p FPS. They gave us what we want. They gave us what we asked for. They went above and beyond. So I don't understand where all the Switch hate is coming from. So guys, stop paying attention to these journalists and YouTubers that has their favorite systems putting out bad propaganda against the Switch 2 and try to deter us from getting the Switch 2, which is not working either way. All those haters, they're going to buy Nintendo Switch 2 just like they did with the current Switch. The Switch 1 sold 150 plus a million for a reason. Everybody bought it. I don't care if you bought the system and then you say, oh, my Switch been collecting dust. It doesn't matter. You went out and bought the system. If you didn't believe in it, if you didn't like it, you would have never even dreamed about picking up a Switch. But everybody in their mother's name is going to pick up a Switch 2. And I don't want to make this video any longer than it already is. So I'm going to go ahead and gracefully bow out. Thank you guys for listening to me. Like and subscribe. It'll help my channel out. And I'll continue to bring you more Switch 2 information up until it's launched. Love you guys. Peace out.